to the 1723 podcast with me, your host, Sean Butler. Today, we're taking a look at Black Freemasonry and Black Freemasons. The origin of African Lodge, America's first black Masonic lodge, dates to 1778 and to Prince Hall, a prominent black leader in Boston, Massachusetts. Hall was a staunch proponent of equal treatment and education for blacks and the abolition of slavery and the slave trade. His additional legacy to Masonic history came from Prince Hall, and 14 other free black men were initiated on the 6th of March 1778 by Sergeant John Batt and formed African Lodge No. 1. Batt was a member of Lodge No. 441, Irish Constitution, which was attached to the 38th Regiment of Foot in the British Army. On the 2nd of March 1784, Prince Hall petitioned the Premier Grand Lodge of England with the help of William Moody, worshipful master of the Lodge of Brotherly Love No. 55 in London, England, for a warrant. The arrangements are set out in a letter and petition sent by Hall to Moody, and it reads as follows. Permit me to return you my hearty thanks for your brotherly courtesy to brothers Reed and Mean, when in a strange land and when in a time of need you were so good as to receive them as brothers and to treat them as kindly as they inform me you did. What you have done to them I look upon as done to me and the whole of us, for which I give you many thanks, and likewise to all the lodge. I hope they behaved themselves as men and as masons with you. If not, I would be glad if you would be so good as to let me know of it, and they shall be dealt with accordingly. Dear brother, I would inform you that this lodge has been founded almost this 8 years and had no warrant yet, but only a permit from Grand Master Rowe to walk on St. John's days and to bury our dead in form, which we now enjoy. We have had no opportunity till now of applying for a warrant, though we were pressed upon to send to France for one, but we refused it for reasons best known to ourselves. We now apply to the fountain from whom we received lights for this favour, and, dear sir, I must beg you to be our advocate for us by sending this, our request, to His Royal Highness the Duke of Cumberland, Grand Master, and to the Right Honourable Earl of Effingham, Acting Grand Master, the Deputy Grand Master and Grand Wardens, and the rest of the brethren of the Grand Lodge, that they would graciously be pleased to grant us a charter to hold this lodge as long as we behave up to the spirit of the Constitution. This, our humble petition, we hope His Highness and the rest of the Grand Lodge will graciously be pleased to grant us there, though poor yet sincere brethren of the craft, and therefore, in duty bound ever to pray, I beg leave to subscribe myself your loving friend and brother, Prince Hall, Master of the African Lodge No. 1, June 30th, 1784, in the year of Masonry 5784, in the name of the whole Lodge. Now, to help us find out more about the history of Black Freemasonry and its connection to 1723, we are joined yet again by Susan Snell, archivist and records manager in the Museum of Freemasonry. Hello, Susan. How are you?
Hello, Sean. Nice to see you again.
Fantastic. Yes. Now, what exactly does the Constitution say about who could join Freemasonry?
The Book of Constitutions tells us that members of a lodge must be good and true men, free-born, and of mature and discreet age, and of good report. It promoted friendship amongst people of all nations, tongues, kindreds and languages that otherwise would remain always at a distance. In this way, Freemasonry set itself up as a radical organisation that encouraged men to join from all social backgrounds and on an equal basis, and brought people together across divides.
Absolutely, okie dokie. Now, anyone who's been lucky enough to tune into some of the museum's content throughout the lockdown would have, I'm sure, seen Susan's several talks on this topic, and as those people will know, your personal research has found details of several early Black Freemasons. Now, how did you find out about them? What was that process?
It's very difficult to find information about early Black Freemasons, as Grand Lodge registers in the 18th and early 19th century only record the name and very rarely the age, job and address of a member. There's no mention of any member's religion, political beliefs or ethnicity. It's only when other records in the archives at the Museum of Freemasonry or elsewhere provide clues to help identify such individuals. Some members appear in lodge histories, for example Thomas Smith, who claimed relief from True Love and Unity Lodge in Brixham in Devon in September 1814. The lodge minute books note that Smith, possibly a soldier or a sailor, was given 5 shillings as he had fallen on hard times. In another case, Thomas Waite, a former steward on a West Indies ship, was initiated in Lodge of Morality, London, in August 1808.
Okay.
7 years later, Waite could no longer work due to illness, and Grand Lodge's Board of Benevolence minutes gave him £5 assistance. Other members we found as a result of research by local historians. For example, William Fifield, a waterman on the River Tyne, was a member of Lodge of Industry,
Right.
Newcastle.
Interesting.
Originating from the West Indies, Fifield was a drummer in various local regiments and was initiated in an Irish travelling lodge, meeting in the Royal Scots Guards Regiment.
Okay. And obviously, presumably you found out about some other individuals, the obvious one included.
Yes, and so until other evidence is found, the earliest black member of an English Constitution Lodge who has been identified is Prince Hall,
Yep.
the African American. He was based in Boston, Massachusetts, around the time of the American War of Independence, where he settled and worked as a saddler after the end of the hostilities. With the help of a London lodge, Prince Hall contacted Grand Lodge for a warrant, which was granted to form African Lodge in Boston in 1784. The museum's archives has 11 letters written by Prince Hall and other lodge members. One mentions John Morant, a preacher and lodge chaplain who travelled to England on 2 occasions and sadly died in London.
Oh.
The lodge initiated many African American men in Boston. Like other English lodges in America, African Lodge was erased in 1813 at the formation of the United Grand Lodge of England. African Lodge developed itself into a Grand Lodge, which led to the formation of lodges throughout America and overseas.
Yeah, that sort of was my next question, really, because obviously a lot of this, there's sort of a distance to this story so far that sort of feels like, from our point of view here in Grand Lodge, it was something that was being viewed from across the seas. But I wonder, did any black Americans join lodges in London or within the UK?
Yes, in fact, we know about 2.
Oh, right.
The archives have details for one American who joined a London lodge. His name is James Frazier. He was born in America.
Yep.
He enlisted in the Coldstream Guards band as a tambourine player.
Wow, okay.
Described in the records as a musician, he was initiated a decade later in Gothic Lodge in Westminster.
Sure.
He died in 1800, not long afterwards, and was buried in St John's Churchyard, Westminster, attended by Freemasons. And there's a rather lovely print, coloured print of Fraser, showing him wearing his amazing feather-bedecked turban.
Oh, really?
Because it was called the Turkish percussion in the band.
Right, I'm with you.
And he's wearing the Duke of York's Guard uniform.
Amazing.
Another African-American musician from Boston, Joseph Rapier, enlisted in the Coldstream Guards in 1792. He was initiated in Lodge of Morality in 1795. And few people know this, but he actually was a ratepayer in Soho, and therefore he was eligible to vote in London elections in the early 1800s.
Amazing. And if people wanted to, where would they see that picture of James Fraser, by the way? That sounds really...
We don't have that in our collections, but you can find it on the internet, and there's a lovely poem underneath it as well.
Maybe we'll seek that out and get that on our social media channels if we're able to. Difficult question now, Susan. Obviously, in terms of the context of the time with which this was all taking place, it's a difficult topic to talk about. Were members treated the same between the ancients and the modern Grand Lodges at the time?
Sadly not. There are at least 2 examples where the ancient Stewards' Lodge found out that lodges had initiated black men in London. Daniel Miller was initiated in Lodge of Industry in September 1808. The Stewards' Lodge investigated the circumstances as doubts were raised about whether Miller was free-born. The lodge was reprimanded and Miller's membership cancelled. However, by the time of the November inquiry, Miller had sailed off with his certificate for the West Indies as a cook on a merchant vessel.
Right.
Then we know about another individual who's rather exotic.
Okay.
Frederick Gisbert Ziegler, who was from Suriname,
Right.
is actually the son of the equivalent of the East India Company for the Dutch. Is
Right.
called the EIR,
Okay.
I believe.
Right.
And so Ziegler's father was a colonel
Right.
in the EIR
Yeah.
and had married a local woman in Suriname.
Yeah.
And Frederick Gisbert Ziegler was the result.
Fair enough.
And he served in the Dutch Navy
Yeah.
and was on a Dutch ship that was captured by the British
Right.
and somehow ended up in London.
Right. Okay.
But he became a licensed victualler at the Cock and Lion in Wigmore Street. Now that pub is still there, although it's been
Wow.
rebuilt.
Yeah. Amazing.
And he was proposed and seconded as a member of Royal Grove Lodge in London. Again, the Stewards' Lodge investigated Royal Grove for entering and crafting a black person. The Stewards' Lodge decided Ziegler was not to be raised as a master mason, and his money was returned.
Wow.
But the story doesn't end there. Ziegler was actually initiated a few days later in the Moderns Lodge of Unity on the 30th of November. 2 years later, Ziegler moved to Hampshire with his family
Yeah.
and joined Lodge of Harmony in Gosport.
Right.
Still working as a victualler, Ziegler paid membership subscriptions right up until 1821, when it's noted that he had gone to sea with the Royal Navy
Oh.
after receiving £10 to help his family from Grand Lodge's Board of Benevolence.
Interesting.
Later, he rejoined Lodge of Harmony, paying subscriptions up until 1836, when he received help once more from the Board of Benevolence. It's noted that he was an inn pensioner at the Royal Naval Hospital, Greenwich, where Ziegler sadly died aged 65, minus a right thumb,
Oh.
in 1840.
I think they should start a petition for a film to be made about Frederick Ziegler. I think that would be brilliant. I think that's going to happen now. We have to make that happen.
Yes.
So we touched on it a bit there. I mean, it's disturbing stuff, obviously, to listen to nowadays. Why did the term freeborn cause problems, and when did this sort of change?
The term freeborn in the Book of Constitutions caused problems as this technically barred men who were born into slavery or whose mothers were enslaved.
Right.
Although Britain abolished the Atlantic slave trade in 1807, and further legislation freed inhabitants of most British colonies,
Yeah.
this did not come into full effect until about 1838. As a result, members began asking questions about the freeborn condition of membership.
Right.
But it's actually a result of pressure from lodges from the late 1830s in Antigua, Barbados and Jamaica
Right.
to ask Grand Lodge to change the wording in the Book of Constitutions.
I see.
So in 1847, Grand Lodge changed the wording from freeborn to free man so that any individuals who were previously, in the words of Grand Lodge, in a state of slavery might be afforded the opportunity to become Freemasons.
And I guess the overarching question, really, that sort of brings all that context together, what does that tell us about Freemasonry at the time?
I think it actually shows how inclusive Freemasonry was, rather more in the moderns than the ancients,
Oh,
it
right,
would
yeah,
seem.
it seems so.
But further research is needed in the museums and other archives to identify other early black Freemasons.
Sure.
I'm sure that there are many others whose stories life stories are yet to be found. A further example which illustrates the inclusivity of Freemasonry in the 18th and early 19th centuries is the fascinating life of the trumpeter Lovelace Overton. A free man from Barbados, he joined an army regiment in England, and Overton was initiated in Royal Clarence Lodge in Brighton on the south coast in 1807. On returning to Barbados on leave, Overton was arrested, but a former Freemason colleague at the Bridgetown Army Barracks helped to secure his release.
Okay.
By the 1840s, Overton was speaking at Irish anti-slavery meetings in Dublin about his personal experiences. For more information, do take a look at my webinar, Who Was Lovelace Overton, on the Museum of Freemasonry's YouTube channel. Therefore, we've seen how the Book of Constitutions provided a framework for members to interpret rules and enabled Black Freemasons to join alongside others without exclusion on grounds of ethnicity.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And again, interesting how it seems like the constitutions did play an absolutely vital role in, not discriminating against people in a time in which that was the norm. Wasn't it, Susan? That
Definitely.
was very much what was happening at the time.
Yes.
And by the way, I would really encourage you, if you haven't watched Susan's webinar on Lovelace Overton, please go and do so, because it's fascinating, and he's another person I think would make a great topic for a film.
And I know who's going to play him.
Oh, go on, Susan, who's playing him?
David Harewood.
The casting directors of Hollywood, Susan Snell, has spoken. You better listen. Susan, thank you again so much for coming on and speaking to us today. It's been an absolute pleasure hearing the fascinating story of Prince Hall, of Frederick Ziegler, of Lovelace Overton, of all these fascinating personalities, and a really important topic for us to speak about, and a difficult one at that. Everybody else, don't forget, please do subscribe to our channel. Make sure that you are keeping up to date with the podcasts as they come. That 1723 podcast, they're going to keep coming your way. So make sure that you subscribe, notifications turned on so that you don't miss any of them. Also, United Grand Lodge of England, make sure you're following us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, etc., etc., etc. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you again, and we will see you soon. Goodbye.